All right, everyone, we're live. And wow, it's the lady from the TV. I never thought this would happen. So thank you so much, Dominique, for coming on to the show today. And wow, talk about turnaround. So many of you, especially based in the UK, will know Dominique for being a right-wing political commentator on TV. Someone who posted often quite sort of anti-vegan views, pro-meat views on her social media. But a radical change has happened in Dominique's life, and we're going to talk about that today. I see her calling herself now a Krishna-loving vegetarian. I see her, despite saying that vegan men were wimpy, she's following the Soy Boy King, Earthling Ed, on Instagram. She's sharing Earthlings on her Instagram stories. Folks, what's going on here? What has happened? So we're going to talk to Dominique about all this stuff today, and we're going to also talk about veganism and animal rights and see how open Dominique is now to that, now that she's cut the flesh, eating out of her life and everything like that. So it's going to be a really interesting chat. And yeah, thank you so much, Dominique, for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I think
So,
it's important to do things like this now because
yes.
so much of politics survives on people being divided and people being so locked into their echo chambers that they just can't fathom why another person would think the way they do. And part
Yeah.
of my transformation over the last year has been me really just discovering that, well, actually, the people that I have derided do actually have a point. And perhaps deep down, I knew that they had a point, but I just
Right.
didn't want to be open to that. So it's been really insightful. Bit of a hit on the ego, but I think that's what's needed really for all of us, to be honest.
You know, I really appreciate your open-mindedness in that sense, because let me tell you about how I know of you and why I was following you and stuff for however long it was. So I actually used to follow you for your kind of like anti-woke views and stuff like that. Because yes, you
Oh,
can get anti-woke vegans, believe it or not, which is probably something that you probably never believed. And I was like, yes, who is this badass woman on the TV, like sticking it to the establishment and, you know, dismissing all this stuff that we get spoon fed and stuff by the mainstream media. I thought this was awesome. Then I eventually unfollowed you because you were posting the stuff about veganism. And I was like, come on, Dominic, what's all this about kind of thing? And I was like, I thought there was a conflict there because I thought Dominic is obviously a free thinker and is open minded. But then she was posting the kind of stuff that Big Ag kind of feeds us about, you need to eat our
yeah.
product for this and that. So I think it's amazing now, like you said just a moment ago, you've just said, actually, you know, there was maybe something deep down there that I was kind of denying. And I think that's, have you heard of the phrase cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
So maybe there was a bit of that going on. I don't know. I guess we can get into that later. But I think for most people, when they're not vegan and they hear vegans talk to them about animal rights and stuff like that, I think the reason that so many people kind of get a bit defensive and they start disliking vegans just for promoting the message is because deep down, most of us don't want to hurt animals in any way, right? I mean, we think of that hurting animals, that immediately has negative connotations ascribed to it. And yet we have this psychological phenomenon, it's called the meat paradox. So it's like we don't want to hurt animals, and yet we want to eat meat. And that was my reality for 23 years as well. So, you know, I
Oh,
was,
wow.
yeah, absolutely. I was the least vegan person in the world. You know, I used to go fishing. I used to support fox hunting.
Oh,
I
really?
absolutely like it's the case with pretty much all of us, Dominique. Like most vegans you see in the animal rights movement, we had your background and stronger. Like
Well,
we,
I've never supported fox hunting, so
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. This is how
just putting
much.
that out
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. So this is how much people can change. Both me and you are examples of
Yeah.
this. About we have now newfound views on animals, and we're trying to resolve that conflict. But let's talk about your life-changing experience that you had, because this is going to interest most people. So
Yeah.
tell us what most people know you for, and who is the new Dominique, and what happened. Tell us what happened.
Well, most people know me for being, like you said, a right-wing political commentator. And really, it started off by me talking about race, because I'm obviously a Black mixed race woman. And that really started out of a place of genuine curiosity, genuine passion, and genuine difference of opinion. Because, and I wrote this in my article, I've always believed that what you think creates your reality, essentially. How you view the world controls how you experience it. So if
Yes.
you're a Black person and you're going around with the idea that the system is inherently against you, you're only going to attract experiences that reflect your preconceived bias, right?
Yep.
Um, didn't know that was what I was saying before. Didn't really understand that that is what I was trying to voice, and that it actually has root in, you know, whatever you want to call it. You can call it the quantum field, manifestation, whatever. I didn't know that that actually had spiritual roots. I just knew that that was my opinion. And so I feel like it got sucked into certain agendas. And I thought that for me to have that opinion, I was right wing, essentially. I was a right wing conservative. And at the time, I really did believe that. So it started off like that, right wing commentator, very anti establishment, pro Brexit. And then as the years went by, I became very anti lockdown, still very much am anti lockdown. And it really sort of changed my opinion on a lot. And one of the main things was the party political system, because as a conservative commentator, I was sort of ringing the bell for the conservative government. I was defending Boris Johnson. I was, you know, rallying around Nigel Farage for Brexit and all of that stuff. And I think the pandemic really changed my view of all that and all of those paradigms. And then I started to sort of think, you know, have I been all the way correct on all of this stuff? There are a few people that were very anti-lockdown when it was popular for a specific niche, that all of a sudden were ringing the bell for Boris Johnson again, the architect of these lockdowns. And I just thought, that doesn't make sense. So am I where am I going wrong here? Something just didn't feel right, essentially. And it sort of led to a domino effect of me essentially questioning everything. And then I basically end up in the Netherlands to do this retreat with plant medicine, which people know as magic mushrooms, but it depends on how you're using it. Certain groups of people refer to it as plant medicine because of the medicinal effects that it has on one's mental health, on how they view themselves and the world. You can gain some really great insights from magic mushrooms. I did a heroic dose where it's basically the maximum dose of magic mushrooms that you can do. And I essentially died and came back to life. And when I say that, it was the most terrifying thing I think I've ever been through, to be honest, of me literally forgetting who I was, forgetting my name. There was one point where I was literally like repeating to myself what my name was, to try and like hold on to this idea of who I was and all of the identity that I had and the sort of things that people had attached to me. And it all just melted away. And I felt like I'd met myself for the first time. And coming away from that, all of the preconceived notions and biases that I had before against certain things, veganism included, they slowly started to melt away. And when I came back from the Netherlands, we ate a plant-based diet while we were there, by the way, because in the spiritual community, plant-based style of living is viewed as higher vibrational, because you're eating food that's basically survived from the sun and not death, essentially. So that's how they view it, and that's why they think it's better for you spiritually. But I came back and I was actually eating meat still. It was in the back of my mind that maybe I eventually wanted to stop,
Yeah.
but I just carried on eating it. And at one point, I actually went carnivore for like a week, where I was just eating eggs, beef, just non-stop repeatedly. And then shortly after, I just thought, well, I don't really want to eat this anymore. And it was really weird, because it wasn't like I'd done all this research and I've decided I'm going to be a vegetarian. It was more so like I was finding out more about my own spirituality. There was a bit when reading the Bhagavad Gita about karma that really spoke to me, about the consequences of contributing to suffering in the form of eating animals, specifically beef, because Hindus and Indians, they really revere the cow. It's seen as the mother, essentially, because we survive on its milk. That spoke to me. But really, it was just a feeling that I didn't want to consume meat anymore. And I just stopped, to be honest. And it's so weird because it's one of the easiest changes I've ever been able to make. And that is a really big thing for me, because I've always struggled with food specifically, because I don't know if I mentioned this in my article. I think I did, but my coping mechanism for my depression is eating food. So my weight will fluctuate a lot because of that. So for that to be involved with my food was a massive thing to me. But I was able to do it, and I've been doing it for almost a year now. And it has been one of the easiest changes I've been able to make, genuinely. Maybe that's because I think it has always been at the back of my mind. I was a vegetarian for a week in primary school. But,
Right.
I stopped doing it because I felt like I was being difficult and making it difficult for everybody else. That's why I stopped doing it, essentially. But it has always been there, essentially.
That's interesting. So I guess if I'd have had the old Dominique on, there'd probably be like a Brexit flag in the background or a UK flag or something like that. Now we see this in the background of your stream. So tell us about the symbol that's behind you as we speak to you now.
Oh, so this is my meditation room. I put all my cameras and stuff in here, my desk, because I guess for me, like, my spirituality is now going to be part of me, because I feel like it's my duty to share things, because I do have a talent for speaking and people are genuinely interested in what I have to say. So I'm not going to try and separate them. And if people don't like that, they can go away, essentially. But this is my meditation room. This is my background. This is a mandala, and it's really popular in India. But it's very similar to the crown chakra. Now, you won't be able to see it up there, but you can see it there. The crown chakra, the shape of it. And these in the background, these are all the 7 chakras. So you've got the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. And these are all our energy centers, essentially. And when our energy is out of balance, certain emotions come up, whether that be anger, loneliness, depression, paranoia. But when they're all in balance, we feel better and we feel balanced. And ways that we can balance our energy centers are through things like meditation. And this is one thing that actually spoke to me in terms of the importance of, like, energy, I guess, because when you're consuming animals that have been through terror, that have been through pain, that have essentially lived a life of hell on earth that we've created for them, because in this paradigm that we've created for them, it's the literal definition of hell. I don't understand how anyone could really say it's anything otherwise than hell for those animals. You're consuming that pain and terror, and people genuinely think that that doesn't have an effect on their bodies. And I now realize that's complete nonsense. So for me, in terms of me as a person, I don't want to consume terror, pain, and death, and I don't want to be karmically responsible for contributing to that kind of suffering on earth, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because there's actually there are 2 different truths about what you've just said there, depending on whether you believe in the spiritual stuff or not. So from the spiritual aspect, right, you were talking about the consuming the pain and the suffering and the terror of those animals that live in hell. Now, even if one is a non-spiritual person watching this stream, it also has those similar effects on society. So the more we normalize violence as a society, the more that we see this actually manifest in our own culture. So many philosophers and writers have spoken about this throughout history. So Tolstoy said, "For as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields." Pythagoras said, "For as long as men continue to massacre animals, they'll continue to massacre each other. Those who sow the seeds of pain and terror will never reap joy or love." So whether one is spiritual or not watching this stream, it's very clear that consuming animals, that feeding into a culture of violence towards the most innocent sentient beings on earth, this is what happens societally, or whether you believe in the spiritual stuff as well.
And it doesn't even have to be spiritual or non-spiritual. So I don't want to come across like this is for spiritual people, because it's not. What I'm saying is that everything is connected, and you don't have to be spiritual to understand that we're all connected to one another. We're all, and the reason why our treatment of animals is actually contributing to the health of the planet is because we are all connected.
Yeah.
And animals are an extension of that. They're an extension of the earth, and we should treat animals in the same way that we should treat the earth, with love and with respect. And you are right. We are, and it was from watching that Earthlings documentary as well, to be honest, and it really like hit home that we are programmed literally from birth to abuse and disregard animals. We actually are, and I didn't see it in that way before, but I actually understand it now. And when I was watching that documentary, just looking into the eyes of those animals before they just were horrifically butchered, you can see the terror, and they're
Yeah.
very capable of feeling fear.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that we're consuming that, it's mind blowing to me.
So before we come on to more about that stuff in your experience with Earthlings, because this is obviously fascinating to me as someone who's known you for a few years as this person who was saying very much the opposite of all this stuff that you're saying
Yeah.
now on social media. How have your political views changed? Have they changed in any way since the Transform, Dominique, or are they just still kind of similar, but you just have certain more nuanced views about certain things?
I think the destination of my opinions in terms of what I think is really going on here is exactly the same, because I do think there are agendas that seek to program people and control people to have them acting, thinking, voting, and eating in a very specific way that serves people that ultimately do not have the interests of humanity at heart. They're interested in furthering their own wealth and furthering their own power. And whether it's the World Economic Forum, whether it's people that think it's the Rothschilds or the Illuminati or whatever, I definitely do think that there are super rich people that we do not vote for, and most of them we do not even see, to be honest. We don't even know who they are, that do manipulate humanity in a way that best serves their interests. I will always think that, because I think it's true. And I think my exploration of the spiritual side of things has further confirmed that for me. So I do believe that still. My problem is that within all of that, I think that the conspiracy theory slash freedom movement is a trap within itself. It's just as much of a trap as the woke movement, because we're all wedded to these ideas about ourselves and about the world that is heavily dependent on the next politician, or the next person that we're going to vote for, or even leaders that we select. Like, some people see the leaders of the freedom movement as flipping Russell Brand and Andrew Tate. Stop looking for someone to lead you, because you'll always be disappointed. People need to realize that the power is actually within themselves and within community and unity, nobody else. And when I was part of this conspiracy slash freedom movement, I began to realize that nobody was saying anything positive. Number one, nobody was saying anything positive. And number two, it was getting wrapped up, a lot of it, in the right wing, and being anti-vegan, number one, or being like vehemently anti-immigration. And I'm still not pro-mass migration, but being so anti-migration to the point where it's obvious that you're a bit racist. And that didn't really align with me, because I've begun to realize we're all connected. So these ideas about certain races of people and certain cultures being inherently inferior are all just part of the program, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so it started to really change my view of things. But the main thing was that nobody was talking about solutions, and it was all rooted in division and negativity. And I began to look outside of that. I began to look outside of the political paradigms of people that, think humanity is lost and that vegans are here to destroy their freedom. I began to look outside of that, and I began to find people that, number one, understood what's going on, that there are people that try and manipulate us to serve their own agendas, whilst also acknowledging that, there is hope for humanity, and that our strength is in being united. while also saying things like they do eat a plant-based diet because they think it's healthier for both themselves and the planet. And I began to see that, and they weren't like ultra judgmental people that, because I think that is the problem with some vegans, that they can come across as very judgmental, and the reasons for why they are vegan, I think really sort of supports the program, to be honest. In a way, some of these vegans that say, oh, we need to stop eating meat, we need the government to ration meat to save the planet. I still don't really understand that logic. I think a lot of that is part of the fear mongering, to be honest, but I do understand generally why people are plant-based in order to stop suffering to animals. I think that's quite straightforward. But I think where they've lost a lot of people is when they make it about the climate crisis, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I don't actually promote the environmental stuff on my channel at all. I do agree, like I said to you before we started the stream, I do agree that a plant-based diet helps the environment. But for me, veganism has to only be about the animals, because if it's about the environment, or if it's about, something else, there are ways to abuse animals that don't impact the environment. Now, it'd obviously be nonsensical, right? If someone said, "Oh, Dominique, yeah, I'm vegan now. So I eat a plant-based diet. Right, I'm just gonna smack this elephant in the face with a steel rod to get them to perform tricks at the circus for me." Now, that person's obviously not a vegan. Now,
exactly,
because smacking an elephant in the face with a steel rod, which is what those circus trainers do to those elephants, that doesn't harm the environment in any way whatsoever, right? So this is why, for me, the true definitions of veganism, as coined by the Vegan Society in the 1940s, is a way of living that seeks to exclude all forms of animal exploitation.
Right.
So there are certain benefits that it can have to it, like health, the environment, whatever. But then again, you can do veganism in various ways. Like, I'm a junk food vegan, right? I'm not eating like a whole food plant-based diet most of the time. I'm eating I still enjoy like burgers and kebabs and all that kind of stuff. But there was something you said a moment ago that I found interesting. You mentioned that obviously in right-wing circles and stuff, there's this whole anti-vegan rhetoric that goes on. Were you aware, Dominique, that also goes on in leftist circles, particularly on the far left? There is a big anti-vegan push as well from leftists.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you want to hear more about this, you can see... Do you know the YouTuber Misha Petrov?
It rings a bell, to be fair, but I'd have to go and look.
She's like a well-known anti-woke YouTuber. She had me on for a live stream a while back, and I was telling her all that kind of stuff about it. And so many people... This is what happens. So you were mentioning earlier about the echo chambers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So right-wing people often see veganism as this kind of leftist thing.
Yeah.
Leftists who are not vegan, which is most leftists, by the way. So I just want to make that very clear, by the way, for anyone watching the stream who's right-wing and not vegan. They see vegan as this leftist thing. 99.999% of leftists are eating animals, right? They support animals.
That's a really fair point, to be fair, because a lot of people do see it as this woke lefty thing where it's someone with blue hair screeching at them that they need to stop eating meat to save the planet.
And leftist anti-vegans see it the other way around. They see it as a bunch of right-wing white racists telling people of colour what they can and can't eat. And it's colonialism and it's racism. I've even heard it was sexist recently. And I've heard veganism is a cis white male concept. And believe it or not, Dominique, if you go and do vegan activism on a university campus in a more kind of like right-wing state in America, so like Texas or whatever, the people there are actually much more open to having the conversations about animal rights. If you go to one of these woke university campuses in the States and you start talking about veganism, sometimes they might actually chase you off and start calling you like a racist and all this kind of stuff. I have unfortunately seen that. I have activist mates who have experienced this kind of thing. They said, look, we just couldn't do a lot of the leftist like university campuses.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess this is just how deep the rabbit hole goes, so to speak. So because you were in that right-wing space, you were always seeing it as a leftist thing. Leftists who are not vegan, they see it as a colonial thing and a right-wing thing. And this is something you weren't even aware of because, like we say, we stay sort of in those groups, don't we?
Yeah, we definitely do. We stay in echo chambers, and it's sad to be honest. And yeah, I definitely viewed it as a woke leftist thing, and I think a lot of people on the right do. But I think it's interesting what you said about, you know, going to leftist campuses and being chased off and called colonialists and racist. I think that's because like with the far left, and to be honest, like I think with the far right as well, it's there's a very there's a very moralized view of they have a very moralized view of themselves and their own belief system and their own value system. So when they come across people that say, "Oh, wait a minute, you might not be as moral or as you might not have such high values as you once thought because of this that you're actually partaking in," that really does trigger something within people.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's understandable, to be honest, because when it comes to animals, it's completely normalized to eat them. Like I realized this when I went vegetarian. It's because I thought that veganism was being shoved down my throat. Now, it's very much the case that there is a lot more choice for vegetarians and vegans now. And it's something that I'm actually quite happy about now that I am a vegetarian, because I can go to a supermarket and if I want to eat a bit of frozen food, a bit of junk food, I'll go to the freezer section and there'll be a lot there for me, which is good. So on the one hand, there is a lot more selection. I'm still a bit skeptical of it, though. I'm not going to lie about why certain companies are jumping all over this and capitalizing on it while saying, "Oh, the planet, carbon footprint." I'm a bit skeptical of that. But on the other hand, eating meat is like shoved down our throats everywhere we go. It's like it's everywhere. The imagery, the adverts, like it's everywhere. And I didn't see it like that at first. And that's why that again just confirms what I said about how you perceive the world controls how you experience it. I changed my perception and my experience of the world changed. And that was what was mad for me. So it's definitely not as shoved down our throats as I think some meat eaters suppose. And I think a lot of them view it as an act of rebellion as well, because certain bodies like I don't know how you feel about the European Union, but the European Union, the World Economic Forum, they're saying that we should do this, whilst also saying that, you know, in the future we might all have chips in our brains and have carbon trackers and health passports. If these are the people that are also saying that we need to stop eating meat and instead eat bugs, you're going to be skeptical of that. That's just, I think, common sense, to be honest. So I think we do need to be a bit more understandable of the people that feel like eating meat is an act of rebellion still.
Yeah, so the whole thing about the World Economic Forum and all this and the Bill Gates stuff and blah, 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 I think what a lot of people who aren't vegan don't realise is that those groups are ultimately reducitarian. They're talking about reducing animal product intake for environmental footprint and whatever it is. And vegans, obviously, we don't promote eating the bugs at all. We don't even eat any products of insect exploitation. So we don't eat honey, we don't eat carmine and stuff, which comes from like the lac bug. We don't.
Why not honey? Because I've actually seen this debate in certain comment sections that say like, eating honey is not harmful to bees, so why not eat honey?
There's a long answer and a short answer I can give to this. I'll give the short answer for the sake of time. But the short answer, I guess, would simply be that if bees wanted us to take their honey, we wouldn't have to put on those suits when we go and steal it from them, right? So veganism just rejects the exploitation of all creatures, great and small. And the idea of veganism is you're actually saying animals are here with us and not here for us. So all it is just saying, like the documentary that you shared, Earthlings, we are their fellow Earthlings. We share this planet with them, and they don't produce things for us, the human species. This is for them. So bees make honey for themselves is the simple answer. And there are actually violent practices in the honey industry. So, for example, in order for the colony to produce honey, the queen bee has to be present. Often to do that, the beekeeper will actually pull off the queen bee's wings. They get smoked and many do die. So there is violence still involved in the honey industry. And I can send you more stuff about this if you want after the stream. But that would basically be my short answer as to why we don't eat honey.
Right, okay. Pulling off the wings. Okay.
Yeah, and this is the weird thing, Dominique, right? All the industries that you can ever think about with regards to animals that have been romanticized to us since day one, there's always some kind of cruel and violent practice involved in that, right? Because these animals are ultimately producing these things for themselves, but humans come along and we enslave, we commodify those creatures, and we start saying their bodies are here for us. You know, your honey belongs to me, your wool belongs to me, your eggs belong to me. And as you probably seen in the Earthlings documentary, even with stuff like the dairy industry and the wool industry, a lot of these things people say, yeah, but they don't kill, a cow to make milk, or you don't kill a sheep to make wool. Those animals all end up going to have their throat cut once we've done using their bodies for all they're worth. So we sell them off to the slaughterhouse for the farmer to make one last profit off their body. Once you're no use to me anymore, you don't lay a profitable amount of eggs, you're no use to me, you can't give me wool, boom, they go straight off to the slaughterhouse. So it's crazy the amount of stuff you will find in all of these industries. But I guess you saw a lot of that, right, in Earthlings. So
Yeah.
tell everyone about your experience of watching Earthlings for the first time, and anyone who might not be vegan who's watching this stream. What was it you saw in there that completely challenged your perceptions, perhaps?
So I mean, I'd heard about this documentary, but I didn't want to watch it, so I didn't watch it because I knew that what I would see there would horrify me, to be honest. But
Yeah.
it was quite weird because I'd watched a previous documentary before, giving the argument for veganism, and it was mostly about the climate crisis. And I resonated with some of the arguments there, specifically about the amount of trees that we need to cut down to make way for agricultural farming.
Cowspiracy, I bet you watched, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But something, I mean, again, it felt more like it did show some of the cruelty, but it felt more about, because I feel like the argument that it's just for the planet is one of like a selfish reason again, and not actually including the fact that it's about what we do to animals. It feels like it's more a selfish argument, like we need to survive. It's about
You're right.
us.
Yep, you're right.
So that was about, yeah, I got that. But then I came across Earthlings, and I can't remember how I actually came across that documentary. I think I don't know if it's because you followed me actually. I don't know. I think I might have clicked on your page because I don't know if you follow Earthling Ed or anything like that. I don't know.
I do,
But
yeah. I know Earthling Ed personally, so yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I came across his page, and then I just ended up looking up this documentary, and what I saw, and this was in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep as well. What I saw was like I was in floods on floods of tears, and I really just couldn't stop crying because like even thinking about it now and just the stuff
Yeah.
that you'd see, it was just like just pure evil.
Yeah.
And to just witness that amount of evil that
Yeah.
takes place on a daily basis to all of these animals, it's just incomprehensible. And that's where it dawned on me, like, if we're going to talk about hell and what hell is, we create hell on earth for all of these living animals. It's not burning in a lake of fire, it's continued suffering, terror, and pain every single day for the rest of your existence until you're brutally murdered and all your
Yeah.
kids are murdered too. And that is just evil. And I think people have to genuinely see it to, because most people won't want to watch documentaries like that because it will make them confront a lot of inconsistencies that they have. You
Yeah.
cannot profess to love animals but be okay with how they're treated, like put in conveyor belts, their throats cut, and then them hung while still bleeding, whilst they're still alive, just
Yeah.
threw around, raped, made to stand, unable to move for hours and hours and hours, pigs eating each other's flesh, and we
Yeah.
eat these animals, eating each other's flesh. They've got massive abscesses all over them because of the fact that they can't move. Chickens that can't move either. Bald because of oh my god, because of like the stress of the sheer hell of their existence. And what people forget is that these animals feel emotions not exactly the same way we do, but it's similar to how we feel. They get lonely, they get stressed, they get depressed as well. And imagine witnessing your fellow animal being slaughtered before your eyes, and how traumatic that must be. And then what got me angry as well, actually, was how circus animals are treated. That
Yeah.
made me so angry.
Yeah.
How a lot of circus animals are treated, and specifically how the elephants were being treated, and how some people genuinely take pleasure from doing that. And it's
Yeah.
like there's a screw loose there. There's because you've been programmed to view this thing as so below you that you think you have a right to torture it. And with the bullfighting as well, it's just evil. And
Yeah.
that will be controversial to some people, but I don't care because it is genuinely just evil. And I think some people separate it into an argument of being pro factory farming or against factory farming, because most of the cruelty that we're talking about in the food industry is from factory farming, which is where 95% of our meat actually comes from. But what about all the other industries, and how we make our clothes, how we garner our entertainment? It's wrong. And
Yeah.
this is slightly off topic, but I'm not sure if it showed the horse racing. I think it did briefly, but I went to the races, like I was invited to the races last year, and I didn't really go again this year because I wasn't sure. Like, I just didn't feel comfortable going because
Yeah.
of that. Again, it made me think like this isn't really right, is it? To be honest, so I didn't go to that either. Yeah, it's just evil, to be honest. And I would really recommend people to witness that sort of evil, because that is what we're talking about when we're talking about hell, and we create it for other living beings, and it's just wrong.
Yeah. And you know what? This is why I'm so glad to have you on this stream, Dominic, because what you've just said is groundbreaking, right? All those people who follow you on Twitter, I think you have nearly 200,000 followers or so on Twitter, or X as it's called now. And this, what you've just said here, was just the most impactful, truthful thing that I've heard you say. And so many people aren't ready for this message, that what they are funding in these hellholes, these slaughterhouses, these concentration camp factory
Yeah,
farms, this is hell.
yeah.
There's a great song actually by a vegan artist called Vegan Queen V, "What Hell Is Like," which I'll send you after the stream, because it resonates so much with what you were just saying. But it's incredible to hear you speak about these things right now, and I'm really hoping from this you can, obviously from after this stream, you can look more into the arguments about veganism and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right, as opposed to vegetarian. But now you may have noticed throughout the stream I've been using terms like flesh and stuff to use meat instead of meat. Why
Mm.
do you think I use that term instead of saying Dominic no longer eats meat? I say Dominic no longer eats flesh. Why do you think I use that term?
Because that's what it is. It's flesh. Like it's genuine. You are eating flesh,
Yeah.
and it's really about perception, because us referring to it as meat is a way to sort of euphemize it, and I
Yes.
think separate it from ourselves, because we have flesh as human
Yeah.
beings, but we don't eat each other, and
Yeah.
that's because we place inherent value and worth. I mean, most of us do. On each other as human beings. So by euphemizing it and trying to disassociate ourselves with another type of flesh, we call it meat. But
Yeah.
we are eating, and I do make these references as well. We are eating like rotting flesh. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And when you really put that into perspective, you're eating flesh. It makes people feel sick, and it should, because that's the reality of what it is. You are consuming rotting flesh. You don't know what that flesh has been through to get there on your plate. You don't know whether it's had abscesses that have had to be removed, worms, and things like that, because of it being rotting flesh. And you also don't know what kind of life that animal has been through, terror and pain, that there is actually a scientific reason for what I'm saying here. I think maybe you'll know, like before an animal dies, they secrete
And
um
adrenaline, yeah.
yeah, and all of these chemicals that are in the muscle and the meat, and a lot of that will be leftover feelings that they've had before they died, and you're actually consuming that. And you could say it's woo woo and stuff like that, but I think I do have a point about the fact that they secrete all that adrenaline, and you're actually consuming that as a human being. And yeah, so I understand why you're saying that. It's because it is flesh, and when you say that to people, it's a bit of a turn off.
Absolutely. There's this huge disconnect, isn't there? People don't even like to know that they're eating an animal, an individual in that moment. Like, look at the euphemisms we use. Oh, I ate bacon this morning. No, you didn't eat bacon. You ate pig flesh. Oh, I had a steak. No, not steak. You ate cow flesh. Now,
Ooh.
people will point at the screen and say, George, I've caught you out here because actually there isn't a disconnect because people say I eat chicken and eat lamb. But hang on. To those people, I say, even in that regard, people still don't connect with the individual. They're talking about it like this collective thing. So they don't say, I eat lambs. They don't say, I eat chickens. They say, I eat lamb, I eat chicken, as if there's this
Yeah,
kind of detachment still from you're eating a sentient being. You're eating a non-human person who, like you said about the Earthlings documentary, you can look them in the eye and you see someone in there, not something, you see someone in their
yeah.
face. You're eating a fellow Earthling who shares this planet with you, and that we have no right to commodify, just as we would not want ourselves to be treated in that way. What right do we have to treat others in that way? Do you see that kind of thing that I'm talking about there with that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, because even then because it's weird how the program has been actually so successful, because like
Yeah.
when we say, oh, I love chicken, me, it's like
Yeah.
you're not thinking of it as an actual animal, you're thinking of it as a product
Yes.
that appears on your plate, that has this texture and this taste that you like,
Yeah.
without actually having to associate it with something that has been alive and being butchered in order for you to consume it. And there's an individual pig or a chicken or a lamb out there that you are chewing on. And
Yeah.
it's like the psychology of it is crazy. It
Uh,
actually is.
And we see this in action, right? Because people keep going to me as an animal rights activist, but George, we're top of the food chain and we're omnivores and we eat animals and we're predators. But then the minute they get an eyeball in their bucket of KFC, or they get a beak or a foot in it, or in their soup or whatever at the restaurant, they run to the papers, they run to the
Yeah.
media. Oh my god, KFC just served me this bucket of dead chicken parts, and there's
Or
a
chicken
dead
head.
chicken part in it. How
Yeah.
dare well, yeah, you just ordered a bucket of dead chicken parts. Like, why are you? I thought we're top of the food chain. I thought you're a predator. Why are you running and crying now that there's an eyeball
Yeah.
in the? Do you think a hyena is going to complain that they saw the eyeball when they were eating that animal alive?
Yeah, and that is the difference. And I do sympathize with some of the arguments that meat eaters make about it being a product of our ancestry and our ancestral heritage. But I think that there's a big difference from then to now. Number one, our
Yeah.
ancestors didn't eat as much meat as we do now. And number two, the animals were much more capable of living a free and fulfilling life. Yes, they'd still die, but
Yeah.
there is no comparison to how we consumed animals in the past, which I think was much more, the animals still died, but it was much more inclusive of their autonomy. And for some cultures, they'd have ceremonies where they'd bless and thank the animal before they ate it, compared to now, where they're all in a factory, you're completely disconnected from the process of killing that animal, and they basically aren't allowed to have any sort of life. They're not allowed to see light. They're not allowed to move. They're not allowed to have families. There's a very big difference between those two things. But I'm curious about, I think, what your opinion is when people say that they are meat eaters, but they're very, like you, they're very anti factory farming and all of that stuff. They'd rather have a good relationship either with the animal or with the farmer. I'm curious to what, because
Yeah.
I'm struggling with that, because I sort of understand what they're saying.
Yeah, so there's two responses I can give to this. Number one is that veganism is an anti-welfarist movement. So do you know the difference, Dominique, between animal rights and animal welfare?
Well, I'd see animal rights as in we have a right to be alive, and animal welfare as in we have a right to be treated well, I guess.
Right. So welfare essentially talks about the best ways to rape, murder, and commodify animals, right? Rights says we should just not rape, murder, and commodify animals at all. So welfarism is ultimately looking at the right way to do the wrong thing. So there's two things that we vegans say, right? Number one, there's no right way to do the wrong thing. Number two, there's no nice way to kill someone who doesn't want to die. So to obviously people who say, I oppose this factory farming stuff, but what if the animals are treated well and blah blah blah? Well, look, I wouldn't want to be in the position if my parents bred me to have a good life and they gave me lots of space to run around, and then one day they just shot me in the head while I was asleep, I still wouldn't find that justifiable, right? That's still a violation of my rights. So I'm just putting myself in the victim's position there. Number two is it's just not the way it happens anyway. So when people say, most non-vegans oppose factory farming, right? Yet, this is the meat paradox, most non-vegans support factory farming. It doesn't make sense. It's like, most people, if you show them any factory farming footage, they'll say, this is horrific, this should be banned. And then they go to the shop and they buy a product that comes from there. Like you said, like 90% of these products are coming from there anyway. So it's just kind of a disingenuous deflection. It's kind of... I find it funny because people call veganism idealism. They say, George, you're being idealistic, trying to build this vegan utopia. I say, no. The idealism is you're trying to find a way to kill nicely, to commodify nicely. These things, those things don't happen, right? It's an oxymoron, right? Where the two words contradict. Like you get these terms, humane slaughter and all this kind of stuff, which obviously doesn't make sense. You can't have a humane slaughter any more than you can have a humane rape, a humane mugging.
Yeah, to be honest, because like some people, argue about kosher and halal and how that's supposed to be cleaner and more humane. It's not.
No,
it's not. It
absolutely.
really isn't.
And what you'll notice, Dominique, right, is everyone from whatever culture they are, they say their way is the best way to kill animals. Isn't that funny that so-and-so, the Frenchman over here, said that France has the best animal welfare regulations, but then this guy from Croatia said, no, in my country it's treated the best. And then you speak to a Muslim in the UK and they say, well, I only buy halal and halal is the best. Isn't it funny that every single non-vegan in the world, right, they seem to have the best way of doing it. When it's like, well, I thought that, the way we did it was the best way. And the thing here, what is driving that is, back when I was a non-vegan as well, I would have assumed that, the British farming is the best in the world and all this kind of stuff, which is just what the same thing as a Canadian will think as Canadian farming. The reason everyone thinks this is because they're convinced by their own country's big ag propaganda that their way is the best way of doing things. And Muslims and Jews will think their way is the best way of doing things and that like that. Because we're all indoctrinated into our own culture's propaganda about the ways of eating animals. But then if you look at it from an outside lens, like both me and you are doing now, we see there's no nice way of doing it. You can't kill innocent beings in a nice way. And just a point there on the innocent beings things. We treat these innocent beings, these sentient innocent individuals who have never done a thing wrong to us, chicks, pigs, cows, little lambs, we treat them worse than the worst people in the world. There are prisons full of serial murderers, child rapists. They get treated better than we treat a little chick in a hatchery who's going to be shredded alive because he can't lay eggs, or the mother pig in the gestation crate who's lying there trapped on her side for a month, who can't even nuzzle her piglets. How is it that our society has become so corrupted that the most evil people on earth get a better deal than the most innocent beings on earth? That always breaks my heart, to be honest.
No, it is heartbreaking, and it's because we're all shielded from it, to be honest. We don't see it, and some people just say it's propaganda as well, because it's better to deny than it is to confront the reality, unfortunately. Yeah, so it's really sad.
It is, and the thing about the propaganda as well is crazy. Because I do street outreach, right? So, like tomorrow, for example, I'll be going into Bath to do a demonstration there. So we show the public slaughterhouse footage and talk to them about what it is they're seeing. And some of the people that I talk to, they'll say, "But mate, yeah, I get you, but this is just propaganda. What you're showing here." And I say, number one, this is the reality. These aren't actors like dressed in suits that you're seeing on the screen here. This is real footage of what's happening. Number two, you want to talk about propaganda. Go into Tesco right now and go to the dairy section. You'll see a package with a cartoon of a laughing cow on it. You'll turn on the TV and you'll see the dancing chickens on the KFC advert.
Yeah.
That's propaganda.
That's a really good point, actually, because the reality is that no cow is laughing and no chickens are dancing. They're like living a life of suffering. The thing with me is, because I've started off as a vegetarian, which I'm sure you'll want to get to, and in terms of like the spiritual direction that I follow, I'm more aligned with the Hindu faith, so that's what I resonate with the most. And they're mostly vegans and vegetarians, but they do follow, most of them, a vegetarian diet, which consists of butter and milk. And the cow is a sacred animal in their country. Like the cows are literally allowed to just roam free and do what they want, and they can come in people's houses and everything. It's quite funny. I mean, what is your view on that? Because I guess surely there's a difference between a cow being in a factory and forcibly inseminated to be able to like produce all of this stuff and then sent off to the slaughterhouse when they're useless, compared to a cow that lives in a community that's nurtured and celebrated and people take that cow's milk. I don't know. Surely there's a difference between that.
It's a great question. And yeah, I guess there are some complex answers to this. So firstly, I guess I'll talk to you about what actually happens in India a lot of the time when people are saying this. Now, I don't deny that there might be the odd household that treats a cow in this certain way, and they would never think about, hitting the cow or making the cow suffer in any way. But there's a lot of hidden stuff here that requires a bit of exploration. So, number one, we have to ask, how is that cow being made pregnant? And what's happening to her calf. So, as you know, right, just as the woman of our species needs to be made pregnant in order to produce milk, so does a female of the cow species, right? So we have to ask how that cow is getting pregnant, and there are often stuff that is hidden from us here when you hear Hindus talking about this. So I do have a lot of Hindu vegan friends, by the way, in the animal rights community, and they'll say that actually Hindu vegetarians are hiding some stuff in this regard. So sometimes in these places they are still committing the rapes with the steel rods of these cows. And often what they might do is they actually sell the calves off to Muslims to slaughter. So because they want to keep...
I've heard this actually, because in certain parts of India it's actually illegal to kill the cows. So they'll like do it secretly.
They put them across state borders, right? Now, here's where there's a weird contradiction, right? India claims to be the country that loves cows more than any other country in the world, that sees the cows as sacred. India also has the world's largest dairy industry in the world. So there's there's obviously something messed up going on here. So there's one thing I'll say about that. Now, in the cases where you might find a Hindu family where this isn't happening, and they're saying, well, no, George, we don't do that. There was the calf just lives with us or whatever. And again, I don't really know how this cow is continuing to produce milk forever. I'm not quite clear on how they're doing this. But hypothetically, let's just say that this was happening. The reason vegans would still not consume the milk in that regard is we want to disassociate away from the idea that society has that animals are resources, are vending machines here for us. So we want to get away from the culture where we associate a certain animal as giving a certain thing for us. Like if you do word association, right? You talk to someone, you say, I don't know, eagle, and they'll say brave, bold, heroic. You say dove, They say liberty, freedom, beauty. You say chicken. What's the first thing that people think about when you say chicken, Dominique?
Yeah, food.
Yeah, food or egg or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So vegans want to break that commodification status that we have, that farmers have actually designated these animals to have for us. Because we oppose big agriculture and we oppose the commodification of animals, we want to break that connection that society has as cows give milk, chickens give eggs, because it's arbitrary, right? You can just say anything. I could just say Dominique is here to give me milk. She's a woman. If she gets pregnant, she'll lactate, right? And this wouldn't be like, that would be a bit messed up if I thought that, right? So this is the same thing that vegans are thinking about cows and chickens and sheep, who we don't want to associate with wool or anything like that. We're trying to get it so that these animals are respected in the same way as a non-domesticated animal, a free living animal is. This animal doesn't provide anything for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it does. The only thing that I would push back on slightly with that in terms of certain things that you can get from animals is that just this whole idea, I think, of give and take. So in terms of what we'd give an animal if we weren't harming it, we'd want to give that animal safety and safety from harm. So you would do certain things you're not killing it or taking anything from it, but you do certain things like maybe you'd put barriers up in certain areas so that the animal wouldn't leave. So you would have to give in order for that animal to be safe. I'm not quite sure that it's necessarily akin to the mass commodification of animals if you sometimes take that cow's milk to make butter occasionally, for example, for special occasions, or I'm not that informed on the wool industry, actually. I will be honest about that. But just maybe in terms of thinking of it in a really innocent way. So that animal's wool grows back, obviously, doesn't it? So if you take some of that to keep yourself warm, I do feel like that is an exchange with nature, to be honest. I don't think that all exchanges with nature should be rendered bad. I think that is a bit extreme.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying. You're talking about us having sort of a symbiotic relationship with animals.
Yeah, it's like a fair exchange because they are living beings as well. Mm-hmm. We share the planet together, and there will be sacrifices that we make in order to keep those animals safe. So I think not all exchange is bad, surely.
Yeah, let me talk to you about this. This is an interesting topic as well. So vegans actually... So first of all, vegans do agree with the first part of what you said. We absolutely agree that there's levels to this, right? Of course, someone just keeping backyard chickens or something as nowhere near as bad as farming chickens, or someone who has, I don't know, a pet lamb or something like this, and they share their wool and they're wearing that. We totally agree that that is not as bad as what's obviously happening in the farming industry, where they're having all these abuses done to them and then they're murdered for it. The reason we reject the symbiosis stuff is I guess it purports the narrative that these animals owe us something for us looking after them. So it's and I saw a meme yesterday. It wasn't a meme, it was a screenshot, sorry. In fact, you might have even seen it on my Instagram. That this kind of thing can ultimately feed into, which is again what vegans are trying to get away from with regards to the societal stuff. So I don't know if you saw, I posted on my Instagram, I think it was yesterday. There was a picture of a woman and she had a chicken in her arms, and she was holding the chicken with the oven open with a dead chicken in the oven, and she had captioned the image, I'm showing whatever her name was, the chicken, what happens to chickens who don't give me eggs. Now, this is kind of the entitled... Right, so while I understand that obviously you wouldn't have an intention to actually do that, what we're trying to do as vegans is get away from that kind of societal thing where it's well, yeah, but, I keep this animal because they provide something for me. And look at me, I've built them a shelter and they're safe, from the elements and stuff like that. Isn't it fair that they give me something in return? But the point is, animals owe us nothing, right? So those animals have been bred by no fault of their own to be commodified species for us, for our profit, for our pleasure. Vegans are just trying to break that connection. So that's all it is. So I completely agree with the first part of what you're saying about it's obviously not as bad. It's clearly not as bad to have a sheep
But I think my point is that inherently bad, period, though. And I personally still don't think that is, because I think that on Earth there is give and take in anything that we do, and that's how we survive, because everything is a cycle, essentially. And that's, I think, where it comes back to the law of karma. I don't know if you know a lot about karma, but the law of karma basically is what you give, what you put out is what you get back. And I think that with everything that you do, if you want to garner a result, there has to be some sort of exchange in that way. And I don't think that exchange, in terms of keeping another living being safe in ways that they wouldn't actually be able to do themselves, in exchange for some milk or some wool, without actually directly harming them, I don't think that that's inherently bad. And so I think that's where I would sort of push back on some of the more absolute, because that's quite an absolutist way of looking at any exchange. And I think that is what some people would struggle with. That's what I still don't agree with.
Yeah, so I think in a vacuum, so to speak, I would probably agree with you in certain aspects, right? I think if we say we have a hypothetical world where none of this stuff was happening to animals, I don't think there would be some kind of situation where, you know, it'd be like, well, it's immoral to eat this egg or whatever, because although there are other arguments for that, such as
I do understand the egg argument. For me, it's more so just the milk and the wool, and to keep, because that is regenerative. It's not like we're permanently ending their lives.
Yeah, I just think in this current carnistic system that we live in, where animals are seen as resources and commodities, I don't think it's good that we play into that idea at all. As I say, we're trying to break that association that animals provide something for us. I think human society, we have these social contracts, right, where we provide things for each other. Animals, by no fault of their own, were just sort of forced into this world to provide us by farmers with these things for profit. So vegans are just trying to break that association, as I say. Let's say we had this hypothetical world where none of that stuff was happening. I think there would be a completely different conversation here. But ultimately, I think one part of being vegan is trying to break that kind of that commodity status that animals have in our society. But, you know, in any case, Dominique, this isn't what's happening, right? So, you know, you get all the people who are saying, yeah, no, but what about if I keep a sheep in my back garden who has the wool and stuff?
Some places, though, that is happening, like tribes and things like that. In some places, it is happening. I agree, though, that I don't have a sheep in my back garden where I take off its fur and like use it to keep me warm. Yeah. I also don't have a cow that I nurture and look after and occasionally take its milk in a very gentle and caring way. But in certain places, that is sort of how it's done, because I do know a friend of mine, she's a Hindu, and she's a vegan, though. She's actually a vegan. However, for certain like ceremonies and stuff like that, she will occasionally have some milk or some butter as part of that ceremony, but generally she's a vegan. So I think I'm just looking at it from that perspective. I think, though, that I do want to go all the way. I think eventually my latest shop that I've done has been completely vegan. For me, it was awesome. For me, it's the cheese, the butter, and the milk aspect of it. Actually, not really the milk, because I drink almond milk, but it's the butter and the cheese aspect for me. That is what I am struggling with, and I'm also a bit paranoid about all of the chemicals and stuff that's put into the vegan stuff. That'd be my concern.
Yeah, so here's that's great, by the way, that you talk about you wanna go all the way. That's amazing. That's exactly what I wanted to hear on this live stream. So thank you, Dominique, for saying that. And I'm obviously here to give you all the help you need in going vegan and making the switch. With regards to the cheeses and stuff like that, Here's the thing, cheese isn't, number one, cheese isn't a basic need. So we don't actually have to eat the plant-based versions of cheese and all that stuff. Number two, you can actually make your own healthy and delicious plant-based cheeses at home. So you can check out, like, you can get yourself like a vegan cheese recipe book, and that you can make anything. You can like make Roquefort replicas. You can make like Boursin was my favorite cheese back in the day. Like you can make Boursin just with like some cashews, water, some chives, some garlic, like the least processed kind of, yeah.
Right, yeah, that is what I'm looking for, because again, when people say, oh, like, but being vegan isn't healthy, I don't believe that you need to eat carcass to be healthy. I just don't really, that doesn't make sense to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't really feel like it ever essentially did, that you need to do this and eat this thing to be healthy. I don't agree with that, but I was a bit concerned about, but these alternatives that were being given, are they healthy as well? Because we already know that processed food is shoved down our throats at every opportunity in really unhealthy ways. Is this just adding on top of that? So that was my concern.
So all it's actually doing, it's not adding on top of it, it's just replacing it. You're replacing a processed food with another processed food, and neither you need to eat. So cheese, cow cheese, is a processed food. A lot of people don't realise that.
Oh, yeah, that's true, actually, yeah.
Right, bacon is a processed food. Steak, sausages, are processed foods.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, they're like, oh, look at all this processed vegan rubbish coming out in the shops. Just eat the real thing. And then it's like, mate, have a look on the ingredients there on that pack of sausages. Do me a favour.
You've got plastic in that or something.
Right, it's like metal bait, cellulose, glucosamine, this, salt, stabilizers, soy protein isolate. Look on the back of any pack of pig sausages and you'll see it. Chock with that. And, you know, these things, if you're going to eat processed foods, I would say at least eat the processed foods that aren't a group 1 carcinogen, that aren't going to cause you cancer. So I'm not saying vegan junk is great. I'm not saying it's healthy. I'm just saying if you do want to eat cheese, just eat the processed plant-based stuff over the processed animal-based stuff. Otherwise, Dominique, as I say, make your own delicious non-processed vegan cheeses at home, and it's very easy to do if you can get.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that actually making the cheeses myself, because I bought a vegan cheese from the supermarket because I was having pasta, and I have to have cheese on my pasta. And I bought it and I put it on there, and it tasted like worms. Like I felt like I was eating worms. I was disappointed.
Which what type of cheese was it? Was it like a Parmesan or something like that, or was it?
I think it was replicating like shredded cheddar. It was Aldi. Do you know they have like a plant-based thing in Aldi? And I tried the cheese because I tried the vegan the fish from that brand, and I'd had the sausages as well. I'm like, oh, this is actually really good. So I did the cheese. And I was like, ew.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just like non-vegan cheese, it's brand dependent. So if you tried the Aldi plant-based cheese, maybe that's a bit crap. But try the Cathedral City new plant-based cheddar, and
I have that right now, actually.
Right, and it's great, right? It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's nice.
So one thing I also wanted to talk to you about today. Oh, I want to be conscious of your time, by the way, Dominique. How long have you got?
Yeah, you can ask me. You can ask me what you wanted to ask me.
Perfect. I wanted to talk to you now about your views on meat and masculinity. I've got an old tweet from you here. I'm going to put this up on the screen now. Right. So the old Dominique said, and we're going to see if she's still...
Oh my God, what is it?
Insanity Group Peter have said that meat-eating men should stop having sex. Translation, manly, strong, masculine men who like to eat steak and have high testosterone levels should stop reproducing. I'll take a meat-eating man any day of the week over a vegan weakling. So very interesting take that you had there. And I think I remember responding to you at the time. I think it might have been around the time I unfollowed you. I think I retweeted you and I was like...
Yeah, because that was nasty, that.
Right, and I was like, what the hell? And I was like, I think I even said to you at the time, but you probably wouldn't have seen it because you got so many followers, like, did you want to come on and actually have like a live discussion about this? But now I finally got you on and we can actually discuss this. So do you have any newfound thoughts on this? Do you have and do you believe there is some kind of societal push about masculinity and meat, or what are your current kind of thoughts on that?
Well, firstly, when I see like old tweets, God, it's actually so weird to read them because I don't
Yeah.
even really feel like that's me. I know it's such a weird thing to say, but like it genuinely feels like I'm reading something that somebody else has said,
Wow.
which is weird. But yeah, I
Right.
did say that, and I did genuinely feel that at the time. But that was a really nasty tweet actually. But do I still believe that? No, I don't think I do still believe that because um, I think that masculinity goes way beyond what you choose to eat and whether or not you choose to eat a dead animal. And really, is picking something from the shelf and eating it really that masculine? I'm not sure it is. I think
Yeah.
the arguments would be that, oh, you know, meat eating men have more testosterone, they're like stronger, they're getting more protein, whereas the soy boys are weak, low energy, thin, and are the opposite of that. I don't believe
Right.
that
Yeah.
anymore,
And
especially because now I do see that you can get a lot of protein from plant-based sources, and I've seen a lot of vegan bodybuilders as well that are men and that are absolutely like jacked.
jacked.
And I've
Yeah.
also seen that like there's something so attractive about a man that's like in touch with nature and by extension in touch with themselves.
Yeah.
And that is what masculinity is for me.
Absolutely. And one of the main thing that is kind of pushed about this is that, it's like it's not masculine to be vegan because it's being like effeminate and showing emotion towards these animals and stuff like that. But isn't one of the core tenets about masculinity about being a protector? The strong protect
Yeah.
the weak. Tell me, right, what on earth do these guys think is masculine about picking on a defenseless animal who literally
Yeah,
cannot
that's a
fight
good
back
point.
against you, right, in any way? And then not only that, you're paying someone to do it yourself. You're like paying another man in a slaughterhouse to get the blood on his apron yourself while you just pick it off the
Oof.
shelf. Like, I can't think of any less of a masculine act in the world, actually, than going
Yeah.
into a shop and buying a brutalized, murdered chicken who literally can't fight back against you. If you want to prove that you're masculine, right, as a meat eater or whatever, step in the ring with like probably the world's hardest man, Dave Leduc, who's like the Lathway champion, the Burmese boxing champion. He's a vegan. He headbutts guys for a living. This guy is like hard as nails. Like he's a world champion in Lathway. I challenge any of these guys who are saying that vegan men are a bunch of pussies, whatever. Instead of picking on the little piglet or the little calf who can't fight back against you, step in the ring with Dave Leduc and then talk about masculinity, right?
I think that's a fair point, to be honest, because that isn't masculine. Again, masculinity, for me, how I see it now, is more about being in touch with yourself and being in touch with nature. And by extension, you will be more conscious of the things you're consuming and the harm that you're contributing to. The
Yeah.
only thing I'd say is I'd want to get your thoughts on that because I mean, my aim isn't to be like a vegan activist well, it wasn't to be like a vegan activist when I first shared that I was vegetarian. And then when I posted a story on my Instagram of a pizza sticker that I was on the tram and there was a pizza sticker on my seat and it said "End Speciesism,"
Yeah.
and I'd heard it in documentary, so I'd resonated with it. And a lot of people were messaging me like, "Oh, but the health issues." Like, surely you see that being vegan is unhealthy. Someone mentioned if you're pregnant, it's unhealthy. And what else? Someone else said, like, you can't get all of these nutrients like creatine, blah, 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 unless you eat an animal. Like,
Yeah.
what are some facts that you have about that? Because I don't really have them.
Great question. Thank you for asking. So it depends on the nutrient, whatever it is, but I could pretty much answer any single nutrient there is. Oh, thank you for the donation here. No Low Plant Powered says weak men play for exploiting innocent individuals. Thank you for that. So it depends what the nutrient is. What nutrient is it specifically that you're not sure about getting on a fully plant-based diet that I could help with? Or is it like the pregnancy thing or?
Yeah, like the pregnancy thing, iron, like apparently a lot of vegans and vegetarians have iron deficiency, like creatine, I think was one as well. I've seen people debate about that. And just all of these
Cool.
things that apparently we get from these animals that we will basically die if we don't get from anywhere else.
Cool. So I'll start with the statement recently released by the American Dietetic Association. So that's the world's largest body of nutritional experts. And they released a statement saying, confirming that fully plant-based diets are suitable for people at all stages of life, including pregnant women, lactating women.
So.
Yeah, and athletes as well. So we absolutely do have the means now in this day and age to get whatever nutrient we want in any way that we want, right? With regards to B12, so vegans can eat fortified foods for B12 like Marmite, nutritional yeast, drink your plant-based milks like you're doing, the almond milk and stuff. These have B12 added to them. You can take a multivitamin, a supplement, whatever. Now, here's the thing. When people say, well, I eat B12 from animals and that's a natural source. Well, number one, it doesn't matter anyway. If we can just avoid that and use modern science to actually get B12 in a way that doesn't end up slitting someone's throat, why wouldn't we take that anyway? But number two, they don't realise that these animals that they're eating are injected with B12 and given B12 supplements. So they're just eating a fortified food themselves, right? Steak is a fortified food, right?
Yeah.
With regards to iron, yeah, no, it's crazy all the stuff that these industries just kind of, because they kind of push their industry as being the industry that, you need to eat this product for. Like as soon as you think of milk, you think of calcium, right? The calcium's a metal. It comes from the earth, right? Which is the same as iron. So the only reason, for example, there's any calcium in milk is because that cow, who is a vegan, is eating plants. They're getting the calcium from the plants.
Their argument to that would be, but their stomachs are designed to process all of that stuff that you get from the grass and things like that, and ours aren't.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's very clear that obviously we can eat plants and get the nutrients from that. Otherwise, how are vegans alive? But they're ultimately just getting calcium through a vegan when they're drinking milk, right? So that's how they're getting calcium. They're getting a nutrient that's come out of the ground to be put into plants. So when you're eating an animal, all you're doing is you're just getting plant nutrients, earth nutrients, sunlight nutrients, whatever it is, through someone else's body. Right, so that's just all it is.
It's like a weird, it's sort of esoteric, I guess what I was going to say, but it's sort of like, when I was watching the footage of like all the blood and everything, it looks like a ritual, some weird sacrifice ritual.
Yeah,
it
no,
looked
absolutely.
Like to me. That's what popped into my head. It looks like some weird thing that we're doing, and we do it every day. It's just, I was mad.
Like a bloodletting cult, people call veganism a cult, and then they're decapitated. They're paying for decapitations every single day of their life. It's like, then with regards to iron, so iron deficiency is actually no more common among vegans than it is among non-vegans, and non-vegans tend to get iron through what's called heme iron. Vegans, which is non-heme iron. Now, non-heme iron, you've just got to make sure that you eat an adequate amount of vitamin C to absorb it. Most vegans are doing that. Most non-vegans are actually deficient in vitamin C. So that's another thing with the iron. Again, it's just as easy as you want to get as a vegan. So nuts, beans, dark leafy vegetables, dark chocolate is a good source of iron as well.
Chocolate.
Great. So that's good. And obviously, just as a woman, you just need to ensure that your iron uptake is more than it needs to be as a man, because women lose iron through menstruation. But it's absolutely no problem getting iron as a vegan whatsoever. The amino acid you mentioned, I think it was like creatine or carnosine. Right. All plants actually have a full dietary amino acid profile. So dietary amino acids are the amino acids that we need to consume. Carnosine, creatine, and so on, they're actually non-dietary amino acids. So those are amino acids that our body actually produces in perfect supply. So humans don't actually need to consume those. The idea that humans do need to consume those comes from studies on carnivorous cats, and the idea that we need animal fats for our brains. And then there's the idea of this protein combining. You need to eat beans and rice to get a complete protein and blah, blah, blah. That's actually a myth alive and well from a 1970s edition of Vogue magazine. where it had an article on protein combining, and that is alive and well today. But the only food in the entire food supply that actually doesn't have a full amino acid profile is gelatin. It lacks the amino acid tryptophan. Gelatin being an animal product, by the way. So the only protein source you couldn't actually technically live off if you wanted a full amino acid profile would be like jelly or something, like jelly babies. So yeah, you can get any nutrient that you want as a vegan, and people shouldn't be persuaded otherwise by these propaganda campaigns that Big Ag have created to get you to buy their product is the reason.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you think? My last question. Sorry, you're actually interviewing me, but I'm just curious, like, just to see. So what do you think of like these big chains like Beyond Meat and the rest of it? Do you think they're good over, like, just in general? Do you think they're good? Do you think their intentions are good, or what?
When we talk about intentions being good, it's hard to kind of with any kind of corporation, ultimately the intention is going to be self-serving in some way. But that's ultimately the world that we live in. Now, the workers, we hear a lot about these, so-and-so will be bringing out an animal product, and the only reason they're doing it is for just self-serving agendas like making money. Well, yeah, that's the reason any of us would set up a business, right? If I'm going to go to the shop and I'm going to fund any business, I'm just going to fund the one that is putting out this vegan product. I'm going to buy that vegan product. So you're always going to be screwed. No matter who it is that you're buying, you're going to be lining someone's pocket in some way. Someone who might be virtue signaling about this, or who doesn't care about this, or who doesn't care about that. They're just making money. But I mean, that's just what shopping is. You're just going into a shop to get the food you need to survive, and you're just going to be lining someone's pocket at the end of the day.
Yeah, again, it comes back to, I think, just a trade-off of... It's a trade-off, but you have to make compromises in whatever thing, I think, as long as the overall intention of it is one that it's good, or one that you can morally follow, I think. So yeah, there's definitely nuance. I think that there are two sides, and I think you're aware of that because you don't necessarily talk about the environmental aspect, but there are two sides of it. There's the one side that I think contributes to fear-mongering and catastrophizing in order to drive more division in people, because that's whenever I've mentioned vegetarianism, people say, number one, about the World Economic Forum and all the things that they say, and number two, it's not going to save the planet. That is what is rooted in people's minds. That is what is making people anti-vegan or vegetarian, because the sentiment against vegans and vegetarians has took I think a really dark turn, actually, and it's gotten far more extreme. And it's because of some of this alarmist rhetoric and how it's being tied to the planet bursting in flames. And some people just don't have that opinion. Yes, I mean, I'm much more aware of the fact that animal agriculture is worse for the planet than good. However, the alarmist narratives that we're all going to burst into flames if we don't stop eating meat, that is what puts people off it. And I think just focusing on the welfare aspect or the rights aspect more so is probably the way to go, because that's just the reality of it. I mean, you can politic all day and all night about the climate crisis, because some people have varying opinions on it. I do, to be honest, and I put my hands up, I do. But you can't really argue with the cruelty aspect, I don't think.
Absolutely, and yeah, so I do agree that we should just push veganism based on the animal rights message, because if you focus on it on any other aspect, what you're essentially doing is something that you wouldn't do with any other injustice. And what you're saying is the rights of the victims aren't enough. We need to push it based on the rights of something else. Like, imagine if, Dominique, I said, we shouldn't rape because you might get an STI. Or the Holocaust is bad because look at the environmental aspects of it. The gas chambers and stuff were polluting the air and stuff like that. It's like, no, what's wrong with these things? Yeah, I'm sure you can talk about the environmental and the health effects of these things, but the main problem is you're victimizing someone here, that you're oppressing someone, a sentient individual who didn't want to be oppressed and murdered.
Yeah, and I think maybe people can sense that it's coming from a bit of a disingenuous place, and
Yeah,
that's perhaps where some of the pushback is coming from. I mean, I think that I mean, I don't know. Some people have messaged me like supportively, but you know, it has been quite controversial. Like some people were messaging me like, "What the fuck has happened to you?"
yeah,
And my response was like, "I mean, what's happened is that I've opening my eyes up to different perspectives and viewpoints, and I'm not really going to be catering to anybody anymore because I think that's part of what I was doing as well. I think I was
yeah,
catering to people, and you know, as much as people can claim to be like free thinkers and you know thinking outside the box, anti-establishment. There is a lot of the groupthink in these circles. There's a lot of the groupthink. There's a lot of the trends in terms of what's popular to say and what's popular not to say, and you
yeah,
just get really just trapped in this echo chamber, and it's really harmful for society because in order for us to progress, we need to be able to talk to one another. We need to be able to have conversations, and we also need to be able to understand each other's point of view without demonizing each other. And you know, not everyone will agree all the time, but if we can like see each other's humanity, that's how you actually come to a solution
yeah.
instead of just shouting at each other from opposing sides. Like that part of the political commentary for me has just got really exhausting. So yeah, my vegetarianism won't be popular, I don't think, but popular to the people that I was appealing to before. And I want to now like attract new people that are more open minded and actually understand some of these arguments, whilst also remaining skeptical of, you know, establishment narratives. To be honest, because like not everything is
Yeah.
an establishment psyop. To
And
be honest.
a great quote there about taking an unpopular position against injustice. I just want to read this Martin Luther King quote. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. So that's all it is. It's just, it doesn't matter if it's going to be unpopular with your followers and that, Dominique. Ultimately, we have to take these positions against injustice just because they are the truth, just because they're right. And it's not about appeasing any crowd or being
Mm,
someone we're not. This is why, for me, veganism is just all veganism is. It's living in line with the principles that we already have. Most people, if you say, like I said right at the start of the stream, this is where the meat paradox comes in psychologically. We see harming animals as bad. We only associate that with negative connotations if you say harm animals. Yet we do it when we go to the shops and we buy an animal product, right? So there's that just that misalignment there. And all veganism is just being true to yourself, and it's just aligning your morals with your actions. That's all it is. People are like, oh, you know, veganism sounds scary. It's this huge change. Like, I feel like
yeah.
I'm changing who I am entirely. It's like, no, you're just living in line with the morals you already have. You don't want to abuse animals. You don't want to see
Mhm.
animals in pain and in terror and fear. You don't believe that they should be slaves for us on this planet, right? So this is all. This is all it is. It's just living in alignment with those views you already have.
Yeah, I agree. When I first cut out meat, I did say that it was one of the easiest changes I've made, and it has been.
Yeah.
But I was really scared at one point because it is a really big change. Like you're fundamentally like changing the way you live.
Hmm.
And, and it was I was scared like, oh God, what if I fail? What if I like look stupid because now I'm a vegetarian and then I go back on it? But and I think that's what maybe some people would be a bit scared of as well. But I think
Yeah.
that it really is a process, and I think people have to be compassionate with themselves as well at the same time that like if you've been programmed to do a certain thing and eat in a certain way for most of your life, it's going to take a while to be able to undo that program. So, I mean, I don't know if you will agree with this, but my view is that you can pursue wanting to cut out meat products, but you don't have to do it perfectly every single day. But as long as your intention is to eventually fulfill that, it's better than just being stuck in one way of thinking I have to do this because not doing it would be too hard. My excuse for not being vegetarian, because I actually used to say it a lot, was that I enjoyed Chinese food too much. I love
Right.
sweet and sour chicken. That was that was my thing. And
Yeah.
I've ended up discovering ways of eating Chinese that like doesn't involve meat. So people
Yeah.
just need to be compassionate with themselves and understand that it will take a while to undo a program, but as long as your intention is good and your intention is to lessen suffering in the world, I think that that in itself is a noble thing to want to pursue.
Well, I'll tell you my story. So the how I went vegan was I came across a speech called "The Best Speech You'll Ever Hear" on YouTube by a guy called Gary Rofsky. Do you know the grime artist JME?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he actually, I've always been a fan of his, and he actually shared it on Facebook in 2012. So JME just randomly shared on his Facebook a YouTube link to Gary Rofsky's speech, just saying, watch it, the whole thing. I was like, what the hell is this? I clicked on it, and it was this dude, Gary Rofsky, this bald guy with glasses, just giving this insanely good speech to a classroom of students about veganism, which was completely alien to me before. I mean, bear in mind, I was never someone who, I always said I'd never even be vegetarian. I said what you said in your old tweets, Dominique. I said I will never stop eating meat. I don't even understand this kind of thing. I watched this speech and my blinkers were just completely taken off. So it's basically thanks to JME that I'm now vegan is the interesting thing.
Oh wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Was it popular what you posted at the time?
I think a lot of people kind of watched it and they were like, damn, that was mad, but I don't think I'm going to change. Here's the thing. Most people will see that and they'll agree with the message, but they'll just be like, I can't do it or something like that.
Yeah, I can't. That's their thing. It's too, I wouldn't be able to do that. So.
Right. But then I watched it and I rang up my mate Big D, who's from a farming family himself. And I said, big man, you've got to watch this speech I just saw JME share on Facebook. It's called The Best Speech You'll Ever Hear. It's about veganism. He goes, what a load of bollocks, mate. Don't talk to me about that speech. I said, no, seriously, mate, just watch it. It was like, nah, get out of here, mate. I'm not watching that. It won't do anything. And I was like, please, mate, honestly, it had an effect on me. Who knows? And he was like, all right, I'll watch it, but it's a waste of 45 minutes of my time, whatever. Don't expect anything. He watched it. He rings me up and he's just like, George, mate, we've got to change. So it changed him as well. And I remember dicking around for like 3 months. So I was replaying all the arguments in my head. I was looking for ways kind of not to do it, right? It was that cognitive dissonance in me. And I was doing these stupid little excuses in my head, yet like, oh, but yeah, what if like my house like has a mosquito infestation or something like that? You know, that must be an argument for me to murder pigs just needlessly for a bacon sandwich. You know, all these stupid arguments I was replaying in my head. And then January the 8th, 2013, we just did it. Me and Big D, we just went to Sainsbury's and we just filled our cart up with vegan stuff. So yeah, with me, it was like the penny dropped, but I kind of dicked around for a few months.
Yeah,
replaying these.
I think it's sort of like the same thing where it was at the back of my mind, and I was looking at the food like I sort of don't really want to eat this anymore. What the fuck?
Yeah. It
was
weird.
Decided, yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, so I think your experience is similar to mine. All I'll say is, the animals need us to go vegan as soon as possible, is all I'll say. So I completely understand that it is hard to undo all these processes. You know, there's a saying, old habits are hard to break, new habits are hard to form. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the animals need us to change ASAP, because every time we go into a shop and we're buying one of these products, we're demanding that the farmer, the slaughterman, whoever it is, abuse another.
Yeah, and that is the thing as well. Like, but what about the people where their whole livelihoods and existence is attached to this thing that they do that just so happens to harm all these living beings? Because we're talking to people that have farming, if I had farming for generations in their families, that is the only thing they know how to do. What do you say to them? Because
so number one, I say that ultimately we have to still take into account the victim over the person who works in a job doing it, right? So obviously we should always prioritize the oppression of the victim over the person who is victimizing them. Now, obviously, they might not. I might say that in a more friendly way if I'm speaking to a farmer or something, because they might often just get defensive. If I'm saying
so like, I'm an oppressor.
Right. So what I would say to them perhaps instead is, we actually have programs like groups like Viva and the Vegan Society about how farmers in the UK can change their farming system to arable land. So there are actually programs in place to actually help farmers to switch. And we have seen cases of this, that there are animal farmers across the UK who have gone vegan. They get sad that the fact that they've been sending these sentient beings that some often they miss when they send off to the slaughterhouse. Again, it's
Yeah.
this weird contradiction.
Yeah.
And by the way, I want to say about farmers, you do get a lot of farmers are just like completely detached from it, literally don't care. They all have different personalities, farmers, right? So some are just completely detached from it. They literally don't give a toss about animal abuse. They just don't care. Some farmers, they're just conditioned in a certain way. It's just all they've ever known. And they're like, it's sad and I've made friends with this cow here, but that's just what happens. I've got to put her on the truck and just make me money, whatever. And it's like, there's obviously that weird disconnect there, right?
Yeah.
But in any case, those ones who are like that, when they do come across the animal rights messaging, they can change. And there's systems that we actually have in place to help them change. So it's possible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because these are some of the things, like, I do have compassion for the people that I don't really have that much compassion for the people that just don't care. Because some people
Yeah.
genuinely just don't care and don't feel anything. Like, some of them actually think it's okay to like treat animals like that.
Yeah.
Like, not even just the quote unquote humane killing, but the genuine, like, calling them names, kicking them, hitting them,
Yeah.
abusing them. And some people actually get enjoyment out of killing them, which is like that documentary, those videos where it was obvious that the people working there were actually enjoying what they were doing, which is just like really concerning.
Yeah.
But for the people that it's just what they've always known. And because what we do as human beings is we attach a lot of our self-worth to certain things, and it's how we like create our identity. So a farmer's identity will be what he's doing. So when you're telling him
Yeah.
that what he's doing is bad and he needs to stop, he won't see, or she won't see, any other way out of that. And so
Yeah.
that's why there will be pushback. So I do have compassion, and I think that just naturally, there should be more support for farmers and farming families that want to stop doing it, but just don't see how they'll be able to financially. Because I think that this is just an inevitable thing. I think as humanity progresses, there won't be a need for us to eat animals. I do think it is actually sort of a natural process that is going to happen sooner or later. But there are certain people that, like yourself, who are meant to be here to push it along. I do actually believe that, because even giving the ancestral argument, there are a lot of things our ancestors did that we would not do now morally.
Of course. Yeah.
We see as morally wrong, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and even slavery and how we treated other human beings, because of all of that, and the people that stuck their neck out there and were willing to be unpopular to stop these practices in our parts of the world, we have naturally been able to treat humans better. And I think it's just a natural thing that we're now going to look to animals and think, actually, we need to treat you better.
Yes.
And it's inevitable. And I think some people can maybe sense that inevitability, and that's where the fear is coming from.
Yeah. There's a great book. I'm going to send you a bunch of links after this stream, because there's loads of interesting things that have come up in this stream. But there's a great book, actually, Dominique, called Eternal Treblinka. And it talks about how human oppression was actually inspired by animal oppression.
Right.
So animals were actually the first ever slaves. It happened in ancient Sumer around thousands of years ago. And the way we learnt to commodify and enslave humans based on their race, the way that we learnt to like sex traffic women or use their reproductive systems in certain ways, the way we used to enslave men for labor and stuff, this actually comes from the treatment of animals. And a lot of the historical oppressions were inspired by how we see animals and how we look at animals and that eventually infected our own society. Just as an example, for example, in in ancient Sumer, they used to castrate male donkeys, and I think they called them Amarkud or something like that, and used to make them plough the field. They then started doing that to enslaved men. They would castrate the men and call those guys the Amarkud. Then they learnt to enslave women and violate their reproductive systems, rape them to impregnate them to produce more slaves, because of artificial insemination that they used to do on cows.
Right.
And it all came from and the first human slaves, it's no coincidence that the very first part of the world that created animal agriculture is where human slavery came from. And then
I did not know that.
yeah,
Wow.
this book is crazy. You will just be blown away by the context and stuff about all the historical oppressions there's ever been and how they were ultimately inspired by our treatment of animals.
That is really interesting. I'll definitely have to give that a read. It sort of reminded me of how, like, the transatlantic slave trade, how like black people were sort of referred to as monkeys or like
Yep.
put in zoos and things like that. It's sort of like that,
Yeah.
a way
Yep.
to animalize people so that we don't have to feel compassion for them.
Yes, and the idea of black people were cattle as well. So
Yeah,
it's, I
yeah,
think,
like yeah, chattel slavery and things like
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah. So it's all kind of inspired by farming because we would live export animals. We would live export cows and
yeah,
call it cattle export. And white people in the West thought, well, why don't we do this, but just to different races of
yeah,
people?
yeah.
So
Mad.
it's bone chilling. It's
Yeah,
horrific, right? Now, I guess the last question I'd ask you, Dominique, it's been a great stream so far, and I thank you so much for coming on and for your time.
my pleasure.
I guess the last question I'd say to you is, what would you tell anyone out there, any of the old crowd who followed you, who is watching now and thinking, Dominique, why? Like, what would you say to them about your newfound views on animals and stuff like that, and all your massive awakening that you've had?
From my personal experience, and this won't be the same for everyone, but how I've come to this belief system is simply by having more compassion for myself and actually looking at me and all of the parts about myself that I don't like, investigating them and looking at them and having more compassion for them.
Yeah.
And by extension, I've been able to have compassion for other living beings and not want to consume them. And that's just what it is. For some people, their story might be a bit different, but that's why I am the way I am. And many of the reasons why we inflict pain and harm onto other living beings, whether human or non-human, is because of deep hatred that actually exists within ourselves and a lack of compassion that actually exists within ourselves. And that's why I agree with you that as long as animal suffering exists, human suffering will exist, because
Yeah.
what we inflict upon animals, we inflict upon each other. And it's just so important to have an open mind and actually investigate and have a look at what these other people are saying and see how they resonate within you. I mean, your mind might be telling you, no, these people, they're part of an agenda that wants to steal our freedoms, because that is the theory behind it with a lot of people. But actually look at what they're saying and whether or not what they're saying morally resonates with you, and just really take out this idea that you cannot do it because of all these excuses, because that's just not true. You can practice what you preach. And the first step, in my opinion, is for people to investigate why they don't have compassion for themselves, which leads them not to have compassion for animals, because that is the root of it. And that might make people uncomfortable, to be honest, me saying that, but it's just true. When I started having proper compassion for myself, that's when I really saw like the way we treat other animals is wrong, to be honest. That's how I came to my conclusion.
Perfectly stated. Thank you so much, Dominique. And yeah, just to go off what you said, I just want to make a quick summarising statement for anyone who doesn't believe Dominique when she's saying about listen to what vegans are saying rather than just thinking about someone pushing an agenda. Vegans have nothing to gain by you going vegan and leaving the products of animal exploitation off your plate. The meat and dairy industry, those industries who have conditioned you all their lives, they have a lot to gain by you not being vegan. So, when you want to talk about which side is pushing the propaganda or who has an agenda, just think which side is it that's chucking all the money at you, to help push this message at you, and then look at which side is not got the power, has not got the money, is just saying, please, all we want you to do is just look at what's happening in these hellholes. But Dominique, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm here to help you go vegan. I do truly believe that you can make the switch. Your ethos that you've professed today throughout the stream is totally obviously in line with having vegan ethics. It's very clear that you don't think it's acceptable what's happening to animals in this day and age. And I just want to let you know that we're all here in the vegan community to help you do that if you do want to make the switch, and we hope you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on.
I really enjoyed it, actually.
Cool.